Alright.
Hi, before we start, could everyone mute yourselves? The meeting will last between 1 to 1.5 hours. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all on Zoom. My name is Kelly Tsai. I am the president of Kuang Chinese Reading Room. Kuang is a unique Chinese library located in the Coverly Community Center in Palo Alto. Welcome to Huaguang's first Zoom book webinar. Thank you for joining us on Zoom to celebrate the arrival of a new book into our library's collection, San Francisco's Chinatown. Did you know San Francisco Chinatown is the oldest Chinatown in North America, and it attracts more visitors than even the Golden Gate Bridge? We bring our families and friends to visit there to shop, taste, and see its many cultural delights. Few of us, though, actually know the rich history behind Chinatown or the lives of the people who live there. So we are excited and honored to have the two people who know they and tell us about this beloved place. They are the authors Dick Evans and Kathy Ching Liang. To whet your appetite, here is a book trailer the authors have prepared to showcase their book for you. Great. I love how this video brings out the excitement and beauty of San Francisco Chinatown. That is what you will see in the book. I call this book an extravaganza in photography and storytelling. Let me first introduce to you the creator of this project, Dick Evans. Dick is San Francisco based and an executive turned professional photographer. He was born in Eugene, Oregon, and earned an engineering degree from Oregon State University and a master's degree in management from Stanford. He had a 50-year career in global metals sector that allowed him to travel globally. These travel experiences led him to a deep appreciation for the different cultures and inspired him to be a documentary photographer. He has documented the colorful and changing neighborhoods of San Francisco in his first two books. San Francisco and the Bay Area, the Haight-Ashbury edition, and The Mission. San Francisco's Chinatown is Dick's third book. I picked up two of my favorite pictures to show you how brilliant Dick's photography is. The first picture you see is Chinese Cultural Center of San Francisco. See how the beautiful staircase shines next to the geometric sculpture? The second photograph is a colorful picture of a Tai Chi master caught in motion. Isn't that wonderful? The co-author of this book is Kathy Qing Liang. The captivating stories of Chinatown are written by this award-winning journalist. Kathy's writings have been published in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Sunset Magazine, and National Geographic books. Her writing reflects her wide range of interests, including travel, technology, business, art, and architecture. As an American-born Chinese, she grew up in San Francisco's Sunset District and spent most of her weekends in Chinatown, helping her mom shop and visiting her grandmother. It was her superbly written article published in New York Times on San Francisco's Chinatown that caught Dick's eyes, and that started their partnership on this book project. This book is a product of Kathy's rich storytelling and Dick's exquisite photography. Before we delve into the book, I want to ask how Dick and Kathy started on this project.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much, Kelly, for hosting us, and thank you to all of you in attendance. And if you do have any questions along the way, if you post those in the Q&A box or in the chat room, toward the end, we'll come back to those and try to answer those. So as Kelly pointed out, this is my third book. This is the cover of the book on Chinatown. It just came out 1st of October. And it follows two other books. The first one that I did was Haight-Ashbury. This is one of the murals with some of the historic rock stars. That mural is no longer there, incidentally, unfortunately. And the second book was on the Mission District, the Latino neighborhood in San Francisco. All three books have been documentary photography books. Here you see all three together on a book rack, so you can get an idea of they're roughly similar size, similar format, and all highlighting the colorful scenes in those neighborhoods. So the way that I chose Chinatown was really based on feedback from people who liked the Haight-Ashbury book and then liked the Mission book. So I would often get the question, what neighborhood are you going to do next? And I would reverse it to them and ask, what neighborhood do you think would be interesting to do? And many people mentioned Chinatown. So that's how I ended up choosing Chinatown as the third project. Now there's, other reasons for that, and that is to do a neighborhood via documentary photography and make it interesting and meaningful and relevant. I think it's important that that neighborhood has some historical significance. It also is important that it is one that's going through change, facing challenges, so that there's a real story to tell. But in addition to that, it also helps tremendously, since photography is the media we're working in. If it's a neighborhood that is photogenic or has a lot of colorful and interesting subjects to photograph. So in the case of Chinatown, even though it's only 24 square blocks, there's just a wealth of colorful and culturally significant subjects to photograph. The first slide and then this one that you just saw were photographs of murals, which are always a great way to to tell the story of a neighborhood. There's also the architecture, of course, which you did see a slide of the architecture. Here we see a slide of the Chinese New Year parade. This is pre-parade in the staging area. There's also, and this is one of the floats during the parade. I also photographed the Chinese opera, which is very colorful. And not only during the performance, but I got to go backstage and photograph it before the performance and get some of the behind the scenes interest. But I think ultimately the most interesting aspect of Chinatown is the people. As you see the young girl here, 6 years old at the time, learning Chinese calligraphy. And the next photo, which actually is Kathy's mother, who joined us on one of our tours and photo shoots and interviews. And we stopped at the Dragon Beard candy spot and got this great photo of her enjoying the Dragon Beard candy.
Good. We're happy you chose Chinatown for your project. The photo shoot you took of the ribbon dancer and Kathy's mom are especially marvelous. So it is the dragon beer candy that she's holding. I was wondering about that. So Kathy, tell us what motivated you to write more about San Francisco Chinatown's community and to partner with Dick on this project.
Well, you know, as a child, I never appreciated being Chinese. I was actually embarrassed because I felt so different than my American friends. My parents spoke a different language. We ate different food. We had different customs. I just really wanted to belong into the American society. So when Dick approached me with this project, I just thought it was a really good opportunity to reclaim my culture. And it was just such a thrill. So I had a chance to rediscover Chinatown after being away for so long and meet some really exciting people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you'll see in this next slide is Reverend Norman Fong is a hero. He's a former executive director of the Chinatown Community Development Center, and we're here walking through the halls of very tiny and compact tenement apartment complex. And then I got to meet Cecilia Chang, who passed away recently. She was 100 years old and she was a very famous restaurateur. And even had a great time with young people like this little girl, Elle Tanner. Elle Tanner she's just such a delight for me. Actually, her name's Elle Young, brother's name is Tanner. And during this photo shoot, she ran away. She ran away from us because she got bored after an hour and she wanted to find her mom. So we had to chase her down, but we found her. Then there was the face-changing artist, and it was interacting with him. That was a lot of fun at Z and Y restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, meeting Dick Evans, I learned so much about how to honor and treat all people with the wonder and respect each person deserves.
Great, Kathy. I'm so glad you found your Chinese roots. In so doing, you connected with the fabulous people in Chinatown and found a perfect partner for a book writing project. Let's talk about the various topics covered in this book. In the book, Dick's photo of buildings, paintings by famous Chinese artists tell the history of Chinatown. Kathy, what are your favorite images from the book that tell about the history of Chinatown and its people?
Well, this one is one of my favorites. It was painted by Jake Lee, and he was a watercolorist, and he was commissioned to create a set of 12 different watercolors depicting the history of Chinatown. And these were hung in Khan's restaurant. And after Khan's restaurant closed down, these paintings mysteriously disappeared.
Mm.
There's another one in the set of railroad workers.
Mhm.
And fortunately, all 12 were eventually recovered by historian Sue Lee. So you can see many of them today at the Chinese Historic Society of America Museum in Chinatown. Then there's St. Mary's Church that was partially destroyed, but it was a key structure that withstood the 1906 earthquake. And St. Mary's is still an active Catholic church today, serving the community. Now, I love this inscription at the top. And if you look very closely, it says, "Son, observe the time and fly from evil." At that time, the priests had hope that this scripture would capture the attention of men. San Francisco was on a very dark path in the 1800s. There were many taking drugs, going to prostitutes, drinking aimlessly, and committing crimes. So they hoped that this would make a difference when they saw this. And then there's Cameron House. Now this building is still there and is founded by Christian missionary Donna Dina Cameron. And with her team, she rescued as many as 3,000 women and girls in the late 1800s and early 1930s from prostitution and enslavement. So these Chinese girls and women were rescued. Today, it provides youth programs, summer camps, cancer support classes in Chinese. And it even teaches Chinese cooking classes to teens. So it's really very relevant.
Mhm.
Now here's a YMCA. In 2010, the YMCA opened new facilities to have plenty of space for exercise, classes, and meetings. It is the only swimming pool in Chinatown that's available to the public. Here you have Chinese theater called the Great Star Theater. Chinese had their own theaters, such as this one, built in 1925. It has a full stage and features 450 seats. Now, unfortunately, right now, it's for the last few years, it has not been used due to financial reasons, but hopefully it'll open again someday soon.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
So beautiful paintings and very special buildings with historical significance. Jake Lee documented these Chinese American life with his watercolor paintings. Now we have Dick Evans documenting Chinatown life with his photography. So now that we know these historical buildings still exist, we should go visit them.
Yes.
So Dick, on documenting history and people of Chinatown with your camera, were your previous books templates for you? How did you reach out to the community to make connections and to gain access to the people and the murals?
Yeah, the prior book certainly did help because I learned that it's important to have a partner in the community. So just as I did in the mission, I partnered there with Persida Eyes Muralists. In the case of Chinatown, I partnered with the Chinese Culture Center, which does a lot of activities, particularly around art in Chinatown. And they were able to help me coordinating with making connections with people in order to get in to see behind the scenes things that otherwise you might not get to see.
Right.
And then once Kathy and I started working together, she was indispensable in terms of making contacts as well. We also had help from Maggie Wong, who's a well-known journalist and TV announcer who is well known around Chinatown, and she made a lot of contacts for us. So the way that we gained confidence was to make contact through people that were known and trusted within the community. And I think that works in every case. And as a result, people were very open and gave us a lot of advice on what to include and what to shoot, and also were willing to be included in photographs. Now, just touching on some of the subjects, I mentioned murals earlier. And this is a mural. I think, Kelly, you just mentioned documenting sites around Chinatown. This mural no longer exists, unfortunately. It must have been taken down or painted over. And it's one that I took a few years actually before I started the book project, but it's so relevant that I wanted to include it in the book and did so. And it is very appealing to people who know Chinatown because it captures this modern looking young woman, but doing some very traditional things. If you look, she's carrying a bag of oranges, as a classic gift. She has on a jade bracelet. If you look at her arm closely, something probably handed down by her mother or grandmother. She's carrying a pink pastry box, which probably has cake or pastries in it. And all the time she's walking by this classic traditional dress shop, which you see in the background. So it's a really nice mural to capture, an instant in time. It's very unfortunate it's no longer there.
But you
but
documented it.
we have it, right. This is just another mural, totally different theme. You can see the notorious PIG, which is a takeoff on the notorious BIG. So it was, and they're in the Monkey King costumes here. Here's another mural, which celebrates the people who live in Chinatown, and particularly the people who live in this SRO building. So these are all faces of people who live nearby, and you can also see in the upper right, you see a pagoda rooftop, which is one of the well-known buildings in Chinatown. By the way, this one was restored during the time we were doing the project. So the original painters, 3 of the original painters came back, put up scaffolding and completely restored that 4-story mural. So it will last for another 20 years. This woman had worked on it 15 or 20 years earlier when it was first done, and came back and volunteered her time to help restore it.
Wow.
Here's probably the most famous mural. It's one that's in the Chinese Historical Society Museum now. It's about 5 or 6 feet tall and about 18 feet long. It's titled 100 Years of Chinese in America, and it's chronological, and it starts at the left with Chinese arriving or leaving China and arriving in the US, across to what was at the time when it was painted in the 1950s, a modern family. This one was like Kathy mentioned with the Jake Lee paintings. This one was also lost for a while, and actually some of the panels were used as ping pong tables. And then it was discovered, put back together in the multiple panels, and then restored, and is very striking mural and one worth seeing in the museum. Here's another one of the Jake Lee paintings. It's in the museum as well. This one's about the railroad construction. And I think is that the last? Yeah, it's the last one about murals. Now, during the project, we tried to document some of the people who have been meaningful to Chinatown and have impacted Chinatown in some way. And one person that fits that category is Bruce Lee. And you see on the left, you see a cutout of Bruce Lee. The man and woman in the center is Jeff Chin and his wife, and he's one of the foremost collectors of Bruce Lee memorabilia worldwide. He's had his memorabilia displayed in the Smithsonian. It's been displayed in Hong Kong, and he's planning an exhibition at the Chinese Historical Society in 2021. They're working on it. But Bruce Lee really his only connection to San Francisco was that he was born here. He was born in the Chinese hospital. Um, but he's always been associated with San Francisco. He lived mostly in Seattle and then sometime in Oakland, where he had a martial arts studio. But he's always been connected with San Francisco. So you do see murals around town of him, like the prior one. This poster, interestingly, we discovered in that closed Great Star Theater that Kathy just mentioned. We were able to get access. We found the person who's in charge of maintaining it and for security, and talked him into letting us inside, which was quite an experience. And we saw these old posters that were obviously from a different bygone day. But it was very interesting to see them still up in the empty theater. Kathy also mentioned Cecilia Chang. She's one who's had a major impact, not just in Chinatown, but around the United States with the adoption of Chinese cuisine. She opened her restaurant, her most famous restaurant in Ghirardelli Square, called the Mandarin. She's renowned among restaurateurs. And we were able to visit her in her home in San Francisco, meet her whole family, her daughter, her granddaughters. And here we have her great granddaughter and two great grandsons having a good time with her. And as Kathy mentioned, unfortunately, she did pass away just about a month ago at age 100. Another important figure who's influenced Chinatown is Cynthia Yi. She's the founder of the Grant Avenue Follies, which is a performing group that performs burlesque dances and singing. And what's really interesting is the performers are in their 70s and 80s. And they were all performers in their 20s in the actual clubs during the heyday of burlesque in Chinatown. So now they've been reborn. They put on delightful performances. They're a great tribute to the positive benefits of staying active and the physical benefits of dance. They put on a continuous over 1 hour show with all of the old favorites and very beautiful costuming. Now here's a statue of a man named Sun Yat-sen. Some of you may have heard the name or know the history. He was China's first president in 1911, although he only held that role for less than a year. But he continued to be influential there for many years. And he visited San Francisco 6 or 7 times in the early 1900s, primarily raising money for his pro-democracy movement in China. So as a result of his connection to San Francisco and his significance in Chinese history, this statue was put up in St. Mary's Square in 1938 and stands there still today. Here's another important figure. Mayor Ed Lee was the first Chinese American mayor of San Francisco. Among other things, he was a champion for low-cost housing. And of course, San Francisco's Chinatown is known for the SROs and the housing that they provide. And a more current figure in the center here you see is Aaron Peskin, who's a city supervisor that has represented the district that includes Chinatown for quite a number of years and multiple terms. And he's been a champion in the city council for Chinatown. Here he is with 2 of the board of directors of one of the largest Chinese family benevolent association. And he's worked closely with the community. Here he is at the donor wall of the new hospital. And he was a donor, but also he was very instrumental in getting city zoning support and and other support to get the brand new Chinese hospital, which is really a beautiful facility, which opened up 3 or 4 years ago.
That's great. So many people shaped Chinatown the way it is. And Chinatown has provided well for its people. So please, speaking about Aaron Peskin and his relationship to Chinatown, Dick, what can you say about the way Chinatown handled the pandemic?
Well, it's very interesting because Chinatown was affected before the rest of the city shut down. Actually, about 2 months before, as soon as the news was coming out of Wuhan, China, um, tourism started to drop, and in particular, Chinatown was avoided because tourists and others, residents of San Francisco, incorrectly thought that their chances of catching COVID-19 were much higher if they visited Chinatown. And as it turned out, the reverse was actually true because Chinatown has had one of the very lowest rates of coronavirus incidents during the whole pandemic. And the reason I think is that early on, people there started wearing masks. They were more connected to the story coming out of mainland China and out of Wuhan, perhaps because of their connections, family connections, and so on. They were just, heard more about it. So they started taking precautions much sooner. Now, they were also impacted economically sooner, as I mentioned. But now it's slowly coming back. Some of the restaurants, or many of the restaurants, are now open. All are open for outside service, and some are open for inside service, and certainly for takeout. And some of the shops now have started to reopen as well. It's definitely been a significant economic blow to Chinatown, as it has been to many of the neighborhood commercial areas. I know where I live, the Union Street Shopping Center, you see dozens of boarded up buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, unfortunately, there'll be some businesses that just will not come back. And perhaps particularly the smaller family owned businesses and businesses who were not prepared to do business online. On the other hand, some businesses who were doing business online, while they've been impacted, they've been able to keep going throughout the crisis and continue to ship online, deliver goods at their door. And as I said, now some of them are reopening. So one pitch here that both Kathy and I will make, and Kelly too probably, is think about buying your Christmas gifts in Chinatown, either in person or go online for some of the stores there, and support your local community businesses.
Right. Great. That's great story about Chinatown handling the pandemic. I was impressed that Chinatown fought off the coronavirus. When I read the article in New York Times that's talked about how San Francisco's Chinatown got ahead of the coronavirus. That's why I asked you. Thank you. So now in the book, it talks about two aspects of Chinatown history. One is seldom heard and the other is well known. Kathy, could you tell us about the seldom heard story of the entertainment world in the glory days of Chinatown?
Sure. I would have loved to have lived during those glory days, because at that time in 1930, Chinatown was a true tourist destination, and there were as many as 10 nightclubs and lounges where people could go. You go to dinner, get all dressed up, you wear your gloves, your nice gown and heels, and you go for like literally a night on the town. And you would go and watch these Chinese American performers sing just like Frank Sinatra, all in English. And you would go and you would listen to comedians, there'd be tap dancing, some magic show, and all over Chinatown, these would appear. So people would watch professional performers that dance just like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers.
Mm.
And many American celebrities and Hollywood stars were customers, including comedian Bob Hope and former President Ronald Reagan. So it was quite a beautiful, glittering era. It lasted about 4 decades.
4 decades. Wow. Chinatown was a great entertainment center with famous customers. That's great to know about this part. So, Dick, could you tell us about the well-known part of the history, the traditions in Chinatown? How was it like to cover the Chinese New Year parade and photograph Miss Chinatown?
Well, first of all, we knew that we had to photograph the Chinese New Year parade because it's the biggest cultural event of the year. It's a very colorful event. If any of you out there live in the Bay Area and have not attended a Chinese New Year parade, I would encourage you to do so. This year, I guess it may not happen because of COVID, but the next chance you get, you should definitely go see one. It's a great event for families too, because there are a lot of young people in the parade, a lot of color, a lot of action. So in order to photograph it, it's not easy to get in a good position to take photographs of a parade often because there are big crowds and so on. So I worked with a name you may know, Ben Fong Torres, who's the well-known journalist and famous or almost famous editor of Rolling Stone magazine for years. And he had worked with me a bit on the Haight-Ashbury book because of the history there. But he also, and more importantly, is the broadcaster of the Chinese New Year parade every year for television. So he'd been doing this for quite a number of years. And when I talked to him about doing the Chinatown book project, he volunteered to get me a press pass where I could get inside the security lines, in fact, right in Union Square, which was roped off to the public, in order to get some great shots of the New Year parade, like this shot, which is right in front of Union Square, right in front of Macy's there. So that was very helpful. Another great way to get photographs of the parade is to go to the pre-staging area, because before the parade starts for probably 2 hours, all of the floats, the marching bands, the people in costume, everybody stages along Market Street and the other tributary streets coming into Market Street. And if you go down there an hour or two before the parade, you can take shots like this one, where you can get very up close and personal, talk with the people who are in the parade, find out, about them, about their group. I think maybe we have another one from the pre-parade. Yeah, this young boy. So that's a great way to get shots as well for the Chinese New Year parade. And in addition, the second year that we were working on it, the Chinese Cultural Center just happens to be located right next to the Kearny Street Bridge that goes from the Hilton Hotel over to Portsmouth Square over Kearny Street. And they actually have the rights of controlling access to that bridge. It's a pedestrian bridge. So they hosted a party, and of course, partnering with them, they invited me and allowed me to, use the bridge there to photograph many of the events and the people going underneath the bridge. Now, photographing Miss Chinatown was also very interesting. The first question I had is, why is there a Miss Chinatown pageant? Why not just participate in a Miss America or Miss California pageant? But as we met Miss Chinatown and talked to her and met her mother and learned about it, we discovered that in fact, young Chinese women and girls were highly discouraged and even prohibited from participating in some of these broader pageants like Miss America for decades. And therefore they started their own pageant, which now is open to young women from all Chinatowns around North America. But it's held in San Francisco because it's the oldest Chinatown and is the originator of the concept. Now, the Miss Chinatown of the modern era is not just chosen for her beauty and poise, but also for her contribution to the community. This is Catherine Wu. She was Miss Chinatown 2019. And in the prior picture, I think you saw her meeting with some students at a bilingual school where she reads in Chinese and in English and encourages the importance of bilingual education. Here she's showing the kids her crown for Miss Chinatown. They were just enamored to touch it, touch her, see the little girl touching her earrings, and to hear all about that. But we also discovered she's a world-class archer and was training for the Olympic Games in 2019, as you saw in that photograph with her standing on the pier going out into San Francisco Bay. And that was quite a surprise to us to discover she was also a world-class archer. Unfortunately, of course, the Olympics were not held, so she was not able to participate. Here you see her in one of her elaborate gowns, but with her also very elaborate bow and arrow here in front of the Golden Gate Bridge.
That's great. You had very good photography tips on how to take pictures of the parade and Miss Chinatown. And thank you for the story behind Miss Chinatown. You were actually treated to a close-up look at the parade. That's wonderful. We get to have the benefits seen in the book. So the next question is for Kathy. What happened during the course of the photo shoots that was unexpected, Kathy?
Well, I didn't realize that housing was such a difficult and hard issue that's been a topic for decades, even now. The single renter occupancy, SRO apartments, are low-income apartments. They're high-rise housing all over Chinatown. Now, at least 25% of the residents live in SRO apartments, and most of these are Chinese immigrants that are elderly. Many apartments have no washers or dryers, no elevators, and they're not up to code with sprinklers, electricity, and earthquake retrofitting. As you can see here, the people are the poorest of the poor. They live in SRO housing. It's often sanitary and very tense among the residents because everything is so crammed.
Mm-hmm.
Now here you have a mail slot, and it is a big deal because in other SROs, when the mailman delivers the mail, he just pours the mail in one big heap, and the residents have to go downstairs and sort through this big heap of mail just to find maybe like a flyer that's addressed to them. So here, this is a really rare, big deal to have mail slots and to have one of the workers from the Chinatown Community Development Center be on staff, help out, and actually help sort the mail, which makes a big difference to these elderly men and women.
Yes. So Kathy, I have a question here from Deanna.
Mm-hmm.
Could I ask you now?
Mm-hmm.
She said, I am particularly interested in the single room residence topic. What were your emotions seeing how these people, families, live in this tight environment?
Well, I was pretty impressed that they were very strong and they didn't complain. I was very touched because I don't think I could live in a place like that. But the people have been there, they're happy to have a roof over their heads. It's better than being on the street. They have access to a bathroom and kitchen facility. And these people here are from the Chinatown Community Development Center. And there is Norman Fong, who is now retired. But they're there working hard to make sure the rents are low and to make sure people are in safe conditions.
Mm. So these elderly Chinese people are indeed resilient and quite independent.
Yes.
So they seem also quite contented living in small spaces because they're close to these shops and
Mhm,
even carrying visitors like Mr. Fang.
mhm.
Thank you, Deanna, for your question. So let's go to the book that shows statues and also talks about family associations and the young generation. So Kathy, tell us about, Dick. Dick, could you tell us about the statues? And Kathy, will you tell us about the family associations and the young people in Chinatown?
Earlier, I showed a statue of Sun Yat-sen, which was an older statue done in 1938. But there are two much more recent statues that are also, I think, very culturally and historically significant. This is the first one. It is, the title is Goddess of Democracy. If any of you remember the Tiananmen Square riots in Beijing in 1989, you may remember seeing this statue, the original statue. It was 50 feet tall. It was made out of wood, cardboard, and paper that the students had constructed. And it was seen in the center of Tiananmen Square. But the one that you see here in the prior picture, and then again in this one, is about a 10-foot tall bronze replica. And it's set right in the middle of Portsmouth Square, which is the heart of Chinatown and the backyard of Chinatown. So it's right in the center, highlighting the meaningfulness of the goddess of democracy and that historical moment in Tiananmen Square. Now, here's another one that also is quite recent. It is a tribute to the sex slaves, or the comfort women, as they were called, when the Japanese enslaved Chinese, Korean, and Filipino young girls and young women to be sex slaves during World War II. So this statue is in St. Mary's Square. It's right across. In fact, that's the Bank of America building you see in the background there. But it's a very impressive statue and sculpture, and quite a moving one too. And if you go there to St. Mary's Square, read the inscription about it and the meaning that it holds.
So Kathy, do you have
Yes,
detail about this family associations?
sure. And then next slide, you see the largest of the family associations, Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association of America. And these, this is one of many that were in Chinatown, and they were created to help new immigrants get jobs and housing when they first came from China. So today, these organizations are still very strong. This one has 50,000 members all over North America. They work with Chinatown leaders and San Francisco leaders to keep Chinatown safe and healthy. And then it's refreshing to see these wonderful Chinese young people. They're embracing Chinese sports, such as dragon boat racing, and developing their leadership skills. This is Bella Chen. They're also learning in Chinese school how to read and write. The others, they go either daily or weekly to classes. Now, in the old days, it was Cantonese that the kids were learning because everyone came from Guangdong. But now it is Mandarin, and that is the national language of China. And they're also learning calligraphy, like this little girl we just love. Her name is Yuhan Chen. And at that time, she was only 6 years old when she picked up the brush for the first time to do calligraphy.
That's great. So now that I know about these statues, I will look for those statues next time I'm in Chinatown. And speaking about the family associations, I think they play an important role in maintaining the Chinese culture in Chinatown today, especially in cultivating the young people in Chinatown. That's wonderful. So now we come upon the favorite subject of why so many people visit Chinatown. It's to see the unique architecture and experience Chinese arts and culture in real life today. Dick, your sense of framing, of perspectives, of color are amazing. Give us a virtual tour of the interesting sites in Chinatown through your camera lens.
Okay, and Kelly, I often get asked too, what kind of camera do I use? Do I use an iPhone or do I use a bigger camera? And in almost all of these cases, it's a large modern DSL or digital SLR camera. I have a Sony A7 Mark IV is a name. And the lens, I use multiple lenses. Sometimes I use wide angle, sometimes I use even a fisheye lens if I'm inside a store or something like that. But most of all, I use a 24 to 70 millimeter zoom lens because it's so great of a utility lens that I can zoom in and out. And this photo, for example, was taken with that lens, and probably 70% of the photos in the book were taken with that. I'll just scroll through a number of different photos and maybe make a few comments about the photography techniques, or maybe a hint here and there on how to take interesting photos. Here's one of the going down Grant Avenue, and what I tried to capture here was the historic pagoda style rooftops and also the very historic street lamps, and to capture them in one photo. So composing the photo where you see that grouping of two pagoda rooftops and then the street light, as a pleasing composition. It shows what you want to show. It conveys the historical nature. And this might be a good place to comment that this architecture that we think of as being historic Chinatown architecture was not what the original Chinatown looked like at all. It was low-rise, very simple, unimpressive, basically shantytown originally. And it all got destroyed and burned down in the 1906 earthquake. And originally, the city wanted to force the Chinatown residents to move out to the outskirts of the city. They resisted and were able to convince the city leaders that if it was rebuilt as a combination tourist attraction and residential community, that they could stay, and that was agreed. So then these buildings that we see today were essentially all built between 1907 and 1912, in that period, right after the earthquake and the fires. Here's another shot of the architecture. This one happens to be taken right at twilight, so you see it's a sort of a different kind of light. The sun had just set. You just see the sky is bright, but it's getting dark, and the lanterns are actually beginning to be lit up.
And it's windy too. You see the flags.
Yeah, you see the flags. It's quite windy, right? Another shot of the architecture. More architecture. This is one of the older buildings in Chinatown. It used to be the telephone exchange when telephones were manually connected, and you had rows of mostly young women plugging in the phone when you got a phone call. In the upstairs part, that was a telephone exchange. It's now, as you can see, the East-West Bank building. And this one's interesting, and also maybe there's a photographic technique here that's interesting. it's obviously an older building. This one built, you can see the date, 1928. So it's sort of a classic 1920s older building with historic significance. But then for this photo, I juxtaposed it with the Transamerica building, which is a very modern building. And you get the old and the new here, which really sort of emphasizes both aspects. That here you have the old sitting right in the middle of the new, right next to the financial center. Here's a series of photos I'll go through fairly quickly, but it was really interesting. When I photographed the Chinese opera, I requested permission to come early, which they granted graciously. So I was able to come about 3.5 hours before the performance started. And that's when the performers come and start to put on their makeup. So this was one of the lead singers actually visiting from Hong Kong. So she starts with her base makeup, then she's putting her wig on. You can see here, adjusting it, getting set, and finally in her final costume. So this whole process takes about, as I say, 3 hours. Here is a diva in the performance from San Francisco. She's starting with her base makeup, taping her hair down. You can see this one. I love this photograph. So let me just comment on it. See the hands here. You see her two hands and her assistant's two hands. And every hand and every finger is doing something. So it really conveys, how complicated it is to get all of the makeup and costuming correct. They're putting on these feathers that are actually on the top of her forehead there, and you'll see in a minute how they look in the final costume. And there you see it. But they put it on with plant pectin, which allows it to stick, but it's not like glue. So it's easy to take off later. And here they're nearly final with their costume. And I think, final touches. So it really made me appreciate the opera performance when I saw all of the effort that goes into getting ready for it.
That's right.
Here's a photo from one of the several dress and gown shops in Chinatown where you can get a handmade gown you can have one either custom made or you can choose from the rack and then have it modified. So this is hopefully not a dying art because there probably is less of it. But if you want a really unique silk gown, colorful wedding dress, or for other events, there are several of these shops in Chinatown where you can get it. Now, I mentioned the Grant Avenue Follies earlier. Here's a couple of shots of them. They're performing. They're in one of the burlesque shows. And keep in mind, as I mentioned, these women were all dancers, probably 40 or 50 years ago, professional dancers. And they've maintained the, their interest in dance. And when the Grant Avenue Follies was reformed, now they perform multiple times a year, largely for benefit events like the veterans and others. And it's a really entertaining show that goes on for an hour to an hour and a half. And similar to the opera, I also got permission to go backstage while they were getting ready. And here you see them getting on their costumes, getting ready to perform. This is Cynthia Yee, who's the founder of the Grant Avenue Follies. And here's a good tribute to the health benefits of dance. I think you can see how well they perform and how fit they are up into their 70s and 80s.
Good example.
Now here we have a tea tasting room. And that, of course, is a tourist attraction in Chinatown. There are several tea shops where you can buy all kinds, as you can see here. This is a small sample of what's on the wall. This is maybe a tenth of what was on the wall. All of the different blends of tea that you can buy. And you can also sit down and get, a tasting experience where you taste multiple types of tea and can choose then what you want to buy and take with you. You also get a real education on how to steep the tea, how to drink it, the utensils to use with it. And so it's a very nice, pleasant experience to go through. Another aspect of Chinatown that we wanted to capture was the idea of the herbalist shops, because there are multiple shops that sell traditional Chinese herbs for medicinal purposes and just for general health and well-being purposes. So we visited this herbalist who was a friend of Maggie Wong's. She's the one that introduced us. And I think he's the perfect embodiment of what I think an herbalist should look like with his little beard, his white hair, and his dress. And it's interesting, while we were there, we saw some large trophies on top of his herbal drawers and cabinets. And we asked what they were for. It turned out they were trophies for his wife, who is a master Tai Chi performer. So naturally, we followed up with her and eventually took some photos like the one that Kelly showed you at the very beginning in that pink Tai Chi outfit. That was actually the herbalist's wife, who is a Tai Chi master. And here we have an acupuncturist. There are several acupuncturists in Chinatown. And he showed us, the back rooms and talked about his art and science and how he practices, and a bit about his clients and what they come to him for. I also met his wife as well, who assists in his treatments. Tai Chi is something that we often think of when we think of Chinatown or just Chinese culture. Today, we usually think of it in terms of exercise in the park, like we might think of yoga, for example. And we discovered during the project that there is actually an annual International Tai Chi Day. And luckily, we discovered that a couple of weeks before the day occurred.
Wow.
So we put out the notice through the Chinese Culture Center, which you see in the background there in the upper right. And this is the Kearney Street Bridge. But we put out word that anybody that wanted a free Tai Chi class and also some free tea and pastries to come at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, and provided they would allow us to photograph them performing Tai Chi on the bridge. So we had a good turnout. As you saw, we had a couple of volunteer Tai Chi instructors who came and led the group in all the different poses and taught a class. And all in all, it was just a great experience. These are two of the participants here.
Was that a one-time deal, Dick?
Well, I think it probably was because it was an exchange of being in the photo shoot for the tea and pastries. But I don't know, Kelly, maybe you could convince the Chinese Culture Center to put it on again, since they
Do it at
host
the library. Do it at the library.
Yeah.
That's right. We should invite them.
Yeah.
Another form of Asian martial arts, of course, is Kung Fu. And here you have some Kung Fu performers. They're part of a class. The man in the middle is actually Kathy's cousin, who is also a Kung Fu master, or Sifu, as they call it. And he and the people here are in his class. The person on the right you saw earlier, that's actually Jeff Chin, who is this world-renowned Bruce Lee collector of Bruce Lee memorabilia, and he's taking the kung fu class to learn it better and practice his own martial arts. Here you see them performing in front of a wall on one of the alleys. And that wall that you see there, you can probably tell is covered in red envelopes. And red envelopes are the traditional envelope that you put cash in at Chinese New Year and give as gifts, particularly to children and young people. But the store owner behind that wall every year puts up a new display for that particular year of the zodiac of Chinese envelopes. Here you see Kathy's cousin again in front of his hero, Bruce Lee, in the mural, which is right across the alley from the red envelopes.
That's great. Just want to comment on the tea hostess pouring the tea. You made her tea aroma almost come out. And then
Yeah,
also the picture about the herbalist, his beer reminds me of the dragon's beer candy.
right. Yeah. No, he was a perfect, I think the perfect embodiment of what I think an herbalist should look like anyway. If I'm going to go buy Chinese herbs, I want to buy them from someone like that who looks like he knows what he's doing. Here's
That's
one
right,
final
yeah.
photo. And here you have a group of women playing, I'm not sure if it's cards or mahjong or Chinese checkers, but most likely cards, because that's mostly what they play, right in the center of Portsmouth Square. Something that's happened there for decades, if you think about this, maybe even 100 years. It's happened a long, long time. And you think of the number of women who have played cards there in this location, and the historical significance, doing it very much like they've done it for decades. But in the background, you see the very modern buildings of the financial center. So again, as a photography technique, this goes back to what I mentioned earlier of juxtaposing sort of opposing concepts in the same photograph. So here you've got the very old and traditional and community-based card game, and in the background you've got the very contemporary, business-oriented financial center of the city. And by seeing both juxtaposed together in this photograph, it makes you think about both with more clarity, I think, and with more vividly than if you were just to see one or the other.
You make the Portsmouth Square look so pretty. We usually park over there when we go to Chinatown. And I miss seeing those Chinese chess players or the card players. And usually there are a lot of pigeons there, I recall, but that day
Right.
doesn't have any pigeons. It looks so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, they've cleaned it up some,
Oh.
I think, and maybe there's less food scraps around for the pigeons now. I don't know.
Could be. Yeah, it's very good. You have just to pose the old and the new in many of your pictures. Okay, I'm saving my favorite topic for the last, for Kathy. Dick's photos of traditional Chinese wedding ceremony. Shops and restaurants are stunning. Kathy, could you tell us the fascinating stories you learned about Chinese American way of life today in Chinatown?
I found out that a lot of these traditions are fading. So here you have a tea set for a traditional wedding ceremony, which would be a Chinese tea ceremony. Now, very few young people are honoring the traditions, but Leanna and Michael are the exception. The children in the ceremony, which is held right before the wedding ceremony, the children will pour tea for their parents and grandparents to honor them. And then in turn, the parents and grandparents would give them a red envelope filled with money or jewelry. And then in this ceremony with Leanne and Michael, it ends with prayer from both sets of parents. Now the Golden Gate fortune cookie company is an institution in Chinatown. It's been there for more than 50 years. And here are tourists lining up outside. It is really, they make very delicious cookies, handmade using a secret recipe from the mother. And this one makes cookies in chocolate, strawberry, matcha flavors, and also flat sesame seed fortune cookies as well. And it's still open today, so I encourage you to go.
Okay.
Another restaurant that's still open today is the Far East Cafe, and it's been around for 100 years. Now, it's the only Chinese restaurant with private booths and original murals and lanterns. So these booths, there's maybe about 5 or 6 booths lining the wall. And when you pull the curtain, there's a table there that you can seat about 4 to 6 people. So if you want some privacy or you just want to have a little party, you can go in these booths and enjoy that after COVID.
Perfect.
And here you have New Asia restaurant that used to offer dim sum before COVID. And you have these steaming baskets. Now today, New Asia has become a temporary market, but that shows how change is happening in Chinatown. It is one of 2 banquet halls left, but hopefully more will be coming once the virus is over. There's been many wedding banquets. There's also some new businesses. This is a high-end restaurant called Mr. Juice. Here you see sophisticated Chinese food run by a young man named Brandon Ju. It's a Michelin-starred restaurant. Also notable is China Live on Broadway. It's a 4-story building with 4 different eateries. It also serves delicious desserts. On the first level is a casual marketplace restaurant. And then on the 4th level is their restaurant called 8 Tables that has exactly 8 tables. And to eat there, you have to spend at least $200 or $300 per person. So it's a very special event to go there. Very beautiful. Now at ZNY Restaurant, it's been offering a show on weekends with Kung Fu tea, where you have a long-handled spout pouring tea. You also have face changing known as Bin Liang. How do you pronounce that, Kelly?
Bian Lian.
Yes. Okay. And
Bian Lian.
this performer is named Xumin Liu from Sichuan province. Now, face changing is part of Chinese opera from Sichuan. And the masters will teach it only to special students. So it's very rare to have someone who has this kind of art form.
That's great. So just want to let you know that traditional wedding picture you showed of a family, many of us from our church know them. It's Carlene and Jerry too.
Yes.
Family, their daughter. Also, Kathy, you sure know how to eat good food and where to go for the good Chinese food.
Yes.
Some of these new restaurants are so fancy. And there are so many interesting things performing there, like the Bian Lian. The performer really sounds very interesting. And I hope to try these restaurants and go see that performer do the Bian Lian or face changing.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's really
Yeah,
good.
it's at the ZNY restaurant, right?
Yes.
And that is more affordable than the other fancy restaurants.
So you can go there any ZNY, you know, just on like a weekend after COVID's over. And, you know, if you have a special occasion like an anniversary or birthday party or engagement, go to China Live's 8 Tables.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's very special.
I never tried any of those. Yeah, that's great to know. So thank you for showing us these new restaurants, different restaurants. And even the old one, I didn't even know, the 100-year-old one. East Asia?
Far East Cafe.
Far East. Yeah, cafe. Okay, good. So we're coming to the end of our talk show. I have two last questions for Dick and Kathy regarding the future of Chinatown. Dick, your passion for the San Francisco Chinatown Book Project is shown in the 5,000 photographs you took. You captured the essence of the community with your ingenious camera work. What struck you about Chinatown as you undertook this project in the beginning? And what is your hope for Chinatown now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And there are many things that I discovered and were new to me. But one particular photo shoot really stuck with me and had an impact on me. And that was a photo shoot I did from the top of the Hilton Hotel. So we're up, I don't know exactly, 300 to 400 feet, I guess, up above Chinatown. And it has, if you can get on the rooftop, which I got permission to do, it has this expansive view of Chinatown. So here's one of the photos that I took, and I wanted to end on this one to make a particular point. If you see in the lower right, up to about midway diagonally, that's Chinatown. So you can see that's all low-rise buildings, 3, 4, 5 stories high. And then all of a sudden, as you go toward the upper left, you have the Union Square district and then Nob Hill, where you see the high rises. And of course, on the other side, the side that the viewer is looking from here, you have the financial center with the Transamerica building and Bank of America and those buildings. So when you're up in that elevation, and you see it in this photo, you can see where Chinatown ends and the high rises begin. And it struck me that, Chinatown's been there 170 years. And despite being in a prime location right in the center of San Francisco, and probably some of the most expensive real estate in the world, certainly in North America, that this has been able to maintain its character and not be developed into high-rise condominiums and office buildings. So that tells you something about the strength of the community, I think, and the strength of the culture. And the fact that much of the property is owned by people who are ethnically Chinese and perhaps have connections, maybe either live in Chinatown or their families used to live in Chinatown, I think is part of that. But it really is striking, I think, and it reminds you of the resilience of Chinatown, because it has faced all of these challenges and pressures and hardships, the racist discrimination against people that lived there, the fact that you had to have your own YMCA and your own hospital and your own Miss Chinatown pageant to survive. And of course, many of those things have changed, but it reminds you of the discrimination and the challenges that Chinatown and its people have faced over the years. So I think this is just a good reminder as a final image of how unique it is to be this little island, 24 square blocks sitting right in the center of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And then sort of the last picture is more looking forward. This is a photograph of a mural, obviously a very contemporary mural, that is in one of these new restaurants called Dim Sum Corner, which is, by the way, Kelly, not that expensive and terrific food. And they are open now. I was just down there a week ago. You can get every variety of dim sum you can imagine and some other dishes. But, brand new, it just opened up months before the COVID crisis hit, unfortunately. And they're doing takeout now. But we particularly like this mural because of the sort of the tension it conveys between the modern and the old. And that's why we chose it. It's the back cover of the book, actually. So what you have here is obviously a young, sort of confident, contemporary woman. And she's got a modern camera. And even the mural itself is this modern contemporary graphic art feeling to it. And yet she's wearing this very traditional red print dress. So you have the old and the new again juxtaposed in this one mural. And you also have a feeling, at least I do when I look at this, that this is a forward-looking, confident young woman. It's not someone looking back to the past. It's someone looking forward to the future. So that's why we thought it was a great back cover for the book.
You picked a good symbolic picture to show the strength, confidence of the Chinatown people. Kathy, your stories complemented Dick's photography harmoniously. Your colorful writing draws us into the lives of Chinatown people in the past and present. It's a fruit of your 100+ interviews conducted with the people in Chinatown. Could you give us some of your reflections on what you learned about Chinatown's history and the people and its future?
Well, according to the San Francisco Planning Department, there's as many as 30,000 people that live in this tiny island of 24 square blocks. And at one time, there were as many as 950 businesses in Chinatown. So you can tell everything's been very compact. This community has lasted more than 170 years. It's very special part of US history. And I believe that through all the suffering, you had the prostitution, you had the racism, as Dick told us about earlier, and you had the earthquake, and then you had a lot of difficulty, but somehow Chinatown has soldiered on, and because of the heroes and people that are willing to fundraise and stand up for the community. So I believe that Chinatown can and will celebrate once more. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, Chinatown will survive, as seen in the way they handle the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
It's great to hear both Dick and Kathy's good predictions and hopeful views for the resilient Chinatown in San Francisco. So now, up to you, Zoom audience. It's your turn to ask any questions you may have for Dick and Kathy. After what you have heard and seen in the slideshow, you can type them in the chat box or raise your hand or wave. I guess you cannot wave. There was one question actually during the course of the slideshow. Deanna asked about those murals. When you say that murals are no longer there, how come someone did not stop them from disappearing? Or what happened to the murals?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a challenge, not just in Chinatown. As you may know, and I mentioned in the Mission District, of course, there are hundreds of murals there. And yet some of those continually get painted over, as has happened in Chinatown. I don't know particularly what happened to that one mural that I mentioned that is no longer there. But it's a complicated question as to who owns the mural. The owner of the property owns the wall, and the muralist typically gets permission from the property owner to paint the mural. And the muralist owns the intellectual property rights to the mural. In other words, if we want to use one of these murals, we need to get permission. So we did get permission on all the murals that we used, or more particularly, if you want to use one for a commercial purpose, like an advertisement or something, you have to get permission and typically have to pay a royalty to the muralist. However, so the muralist owns the property rights. However, because the property owner owns the wall, they have the right to actually paint over or cover that wall if they choose to do so. Now, more recently, that's run into a lot of resistance, particularly when it's of historical significance. And there were a couple cases, again, in the mission in the last year where
So
a new
how
property
you doing?
owner.
Huh?
Edna has a question.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Hold on. So a new property owner wanted to paint over the wall, but it was a very historical mural. And they painted over and then had demonstrations and all kinds of resistance. So in most cases, when it is painted over, it's because the property owner chooses to do so. And in some cases, if a mural is constantly being defaced, which has not been as big a problem in Chinatown as it is in maybe some other locations, then the owner may decide it's not worth redoing it over and over. I hope I answered your question. I think maybe in regard to the historical murals, like the one that's in the museum, that 100 years of Chinese in America, that one, of course, was, taken down. It was on a housing project, I believe, right, Kathy?
Yes, it was.
You
the
used to
unit.
walk by it, you said, when you
Yeah, when I was a
visited Chinatown. Yeah.
preschooler. Yeah, it was hung
Yeah.
on the exterior wall. So I'm
And
so
then
glad it was preserved.
it was taken down, used as a ping pong table.
Yeah. There
So
are 7 panels.
that's when there was less sensitivity, I think, to the historic significance. Today, I don't think you would see some of these murals being changed without both probably the muralist and the property owner agreeing.
Are there any other questions? I think there are a lot of comments, no questions. They thank you so much for the wonderful, meaningful book. Thanks to the
Oh, there is one more for Kathy, actually. I just see.
Oh, you saw it?
Just popped up. Yeah.
I don't see it. Maybe you see
Okay,
it.
I can read it to her.
Okay.
It said, I enjoyed the presentation. Thank you, Dick and Kathy. This question is for Kathy. I noticed that my daughter, as college students, are able to, or at least have desires to appreciate Chinese culture as they are getting older. Do you appreciate Chinese culture more after this project? If yes, what do you appreciate more or are more proud of besides the resilience that you have mentioned?
I really have, it's been like coming full circle for me, because I guess when I was little, my, it was kind of, I felt like it was kind of pushed on me that, having to learn Chinese and culture. And so when you're a little kid and it's pushed on you, you kind of resist. But coming back to it and understanding the history has really made me appreciate what the forefathers did when they first came to this country. It made me more sensitive to their immigrant struggle of, imagine your whole family's on a ship, you're looking forward to leaving war and poverty behind you. And then once you land, people don't like you, they hate you, and you're just shocked. And so it just made me very humbled to think that I have all these privileges. I can vote, I can buy property, I can send my kids to public school. In the old days, you had to send your kids to a Chinese school to get a lesser education. And the Chinese had to fight California Supreme Court, US Supreme Court to get their rights, to get citizenship. So there was a lot of struggle and heroes that came before us. And I didn't realize that. So I'm very proud now to know that Chinese didn't have to be the shy, cowering, timid type of people. There are people that were very, very brave and lost their lives over it too.
Good question, E. Are there any other questions?
Great question.
Many people comment on your beautiful photography, Dick.
Thank you. And I guess just as a final remark, Kathy and I both encourage you to number one, buy the book because all the benefit goes to nonprofits. It's a nonprofit project, and all the revenue goes to the Chinese Culture Center and Heyday Books and benefits others. And also to support Chinatown in terms of thinking about your Christmas shopping. So please go support the community. It's a good time to do so, and it would be greatly appreciated by them.
That's
And it's
great.
not crowded. It's not crowded right now.
Right.
Yeah. And you can find parking at the Portsmouth Square.
That's right.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If there are no more questions, we can conclude our Zoom.
Can I make a one
Marjorie,
comment?
yes. Go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, Marjorie. She's my sister-in-law
Okay.
from Maine.
I live in Maine, and I belongs to the Chinese American Friendship Association of Maine.
Wow.
And right now we are in the program to try to introduce the Chinese culture and more, especially to celebrate the upcoming Chinese New Year, which is February the 12th. So I
Okay.
would just wonder, is there's any way we can hold up some of your material so we can put on a video show for the association in Maine, So
That'd be
that's
great.
what I just wanted to know, is if there's any way I can contact who or can hold up some of your material. And also, with your book review, I probably can figure out how to manage to sell some of the book here too.
Good. Well, I mean, if you would like, we would be willing to do a talk for your group. It'd be interesting to do one for a group in Maine, don't you think, Kathy?
Oh, that would be wonderful if that's the
And-
case.
So much
Okay.
fun.
And also,
Fun.
well, yeah, I mean, that might be
Okay,
fun.
you know what? I'm the part of the board member, so I'm going to be presenting this into our board, and to see if that would be a great idea, and can invite your guy to give the group here have a talk. That would be great.
Right, and we could send you a link. I think either Kelly or Kathy can send you a link
Mhm.
for the trailer, the book trailer,
That video you
Oh,
you can
that 2-minute trailer, because that's a good way to,
okay, that would be wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
at least that would be great because, well, Maine is a very small Chinese population. You
Right.
probably realize that. When I first moved to Maine just 1 year ago, I saw there's no single Chinese in my town at all. No single, I'm the only one. But anyway, I gradually get myself connected. So that's why I become the board member on this Chinese American Friendship Association of
Right.
Maine. And we probably have around 400 membership this moment.
That's
Wonderful.
Oh,
big.
yeah,
That's
that's
wonderful.
good. And
Yeah.
you don't have to limit it to Chinese Americans either, obviously,
No. We
Nor-
are welcome. We have a lot of Americans.
nor even,
Actually, our board president is American. Okay.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
And you
Right.
could also, is there a Chinese Association of New Hampshire or something like that? Or
No.
Massachusetts, you could also,
Yeah. Well,
invite
actually,
them.
we have quite a connection with people in Boston area.
Yeah,
Because last year when this association, they have a big celebration for Chinese New Year, but that was before the COVID days. So we invite a lot of very good performer show up from Boston to come to Maine, Portland, and have a big celebration festival almost. But this year was all of COVID, so we have to figure out doing all the celebration online. So
Right.
that's the challenge right now. Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you,
All right.
Marjorie. I think there's another question from Margot. I know there are tours of Chinatown. How do I access one of them?
There's a organization called All About Chinatown Tours. I think it's all about Chinatown tours.com or .org. But Linda Lee is a wonderful tour guide. I was on one of her tours and she's excellent. Now, many of the tours have been suspended. So, but that one I could highly recommend, All About Chinatown Tours. Yeah.
So you can
And-
give me the give me
And
the
just, yeah, just to mention
Okay.
two others. There's one called, what is it? Chinatown Ghost Tours, I think. It's one that Cynthia Yee, who formed the Grand Avenue Follies, has organized that one. And I've not gone on that one, but I understand it's quite interesting. It's a nighttime tour. And they
Wow.
take you to all the haunted places in Chinatown. And then there's one called Walk Whiz Tours, or Walk Whiz Chinatown Tours. Um,
Oh, I see.
yeah,
WOK.
WOK, WIZ, yeah. Mhm. But the one that Kathy mentioned, we actually photographed it, and I think it's in the book, isn't it, Kathy?
Yeah.
In fact, if you get a copy of the book,
The PDF file.
yeah, you can look in, Kelly has it for sure, but there's a photograph in Portsmouth Square with Linda and her group of students from, where was it, Modesto or Fresno?
Fresno.
Fresno.
Oh,
Yeah.
I remember that
And-
picture with the birds flying up there.
Yeah, and it's all around the Goddess of Democracy statue.
Yes.
They're
yes.
all standing on the and if you want to know where the pigeons went, they all went into that photo. There's got to be 100 pigeons who just burst out as we took that photo. So it's a really good combination.
That's great. So I thought, Edna, did you have a question before? Edna? I guess not. Okay.
Yeah.
So thank you all for participating in the question and answer. And I want to thank you to Dick and Kathy for a wonderful close-up book at this community of San Francisco's Chinatown. It is a place filled with diverse and resilient residents, unique architecture, cuisine, and culture. It has undergone progress, but has maintained its unique character and authenticity. I also wish to acknowledge our wonderful Zoom technologist, Laura. Thank you for setting up such a good slideshow for Dick and Kathy's book on San Francisco's Chinatown. Last but not least, thank you, Zoom viewers. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for attending this Zoom, Kuang's first Zoom book talk. So like Dick said, you can order the book online, and all the proceeds are donated to the local nonprofits like the Chinese Cultural Center of San Francisco. So I hope and pray that pandemic will be over soon and we can go see each other at Chinatown, go to those restaurants, or you can come to Huaguang Chinese Reading Room. We're in Palo Alto. Okay, thank you so much. Hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.